Perfect. Okay, so we're here live. This is see-through. It is your, there we go. It's our place where we can discover spiritual topics, talk about some spiritual topics, help see each other through the obstacles, try and figure out what's going on with all this stuff. My name is Achita Gopi, and I'm live in our Patreon room with some of our friends, and also on YouTube. This is every Sunday. It's about 10 a.m. New York time, and we've been journeying through Krishna book. And so we'll continue to journey through Krishna book today. We got to a really exciting part. So now we've got to continue on because we left off at a cliffhanger. And we left off at a really, really intense section. And we'll be talking about faith over fear and what that looks like, what that might look like in our lives, how we are going to somehow or other try and handle this urge to use fear over faith, because normally that's how it happens, isn't it? It's normally not like immediate, our gut reaction, the thing to go to is faith, let's do it. No, we usually work on the side of fear first, and then we're like, yeah, we'll figure out the faith part later. So we're going to try and figure out what are some tips, how can we move to a space where we're using faith more. Thank you so much. We have a link in the Zoom room, at least. If we can get a link on YouTube also in the comments, that'd be so great. Someone. We have the Veda Base online. It's vedabase.io. And you can find the Krishna book there if you'd like to read along online. Or if you would like to read along with a physical copy, perfect. If you have a digital copy like myself, also perfect. Basically, any way you read it, it's going to be great. It's going to give all the benefits and wash away all the sins. It's going to be amazing. So, with that said, we are still in chapter 1, the advent of Lord Krishna, where technically he doesn't advent. He just kind of talks about the plan to advent. Right? It's giving us a whole rundown. Guys, here's the deal. I'm going to come and do the things. And then he told all of the demigods, you also should come and help out. And then he told his Anantashesh, he said, you too, you should come and help out. And then he told his internal Maya, he said, you come too. Basically, everybody gets to come to the party. Everybody. Including all of the other incarnations of Lord Vishnu. Everybody come to the party. So I like that we're also all invited. And anytime we're feeling like we need an escape or a getaway, this is what I loved about Krishna's stories. They were a real, really, really good escape. Especially when the world is always doing weird and crazy things. And we always need a good escape. So, without further ado, we have some intense music in honor of our intense scenes. Okay, so where we left off, Kamsa was driving the chariot of his sister Devaki and his new brother-in-law Vasudeva, when suddenly there was a miraculous sound vibrated from the sky, which especially announced to Kamsa, Kamsa, you are such a fool. You are driving the chariot of your sister and your brother-in-law, but you do not know that the 8th child of this sister will kill you. Kamsa was the son of Ugrasena of the Bhoja dynasty. It is said that Kamsa was the most demonic of all the Bhoja dynasty kings. Immediately after hearing the prophecy from the sky, he caught hold of Devaki's hair and was just about to kill her with his sword. Vasudeva was astonished at Kamsa's behavior, and in order to pacify the cruel, shameless brother-in-law, he began to speak as follows with great reason and evidence. So cruel and shameless because your sister, your younger sister, is often supposed to be treated as you would treat your own daughter. She's supposed to be afforded every single protection, all comforts, whatever she needs, she should have. And now instead, he's kind of like caught her up by the hair, and she's got a long braid, I'm sure, and he's kind of like yoked it up, and he has a sword, and he's ready to do away with her life in order to save his own. It's kind of like, you get those situations, and they make shows about them, and it's like you can pick your family or your loved one, or you get into a situation and it's like family or dash. It's like, do you either run away, do you like push them in front of the moving vehicle, or do you pick your family member? Here in essence, Kamsa is like, no, take her, it's fine. And what he thinks is, the eighth son of this child, this sister will kill me, then she won't have a sister. Like, I won't have a sister. No, it's no sister, no children. It's fine. It's perfect. So this is Kamsa thinking on his feet. Not great. Not great. So now we have Vasudeva. Let's see what Vasudeva is going to do. He said, "My dear brother-in-law, you are the most famous king of the Boja dynasty, and people know that you are the greatest warrior and a valiant king. How is it that you are so infuriated that you are prepared to kill a woman who is your own sister at the auspicious time of her marriage? Why should you be so much afraid of death? Death is already born along with your birth. From the very day you took your birth, you began to die. Suppose you are 25 years old. That means you have already died 25 years. Every moment, every second you are dying. Why then should you be so much afraid of death? Final death is inevitable. You may die either today or in 100 years. You cannot avoid death. Why should you be so much afraid? Actually, death means annihilation of the present body. As soon as the present body stops functioning and mixes with the 5 elements of material nature, the living entity within the body accepts another body according to his present action and reaction. It is just as when a man walks on the street, he puts forward his foot, and when he is confident that his foot is situated on sound ground, he lifts the other foot. In this way, one after another, the body changes and the soul transmigrates. See how the plant worms change from one twig to another so carefully. Similarly, the living entity changes his body as soon as the higher authorities decide on his next body. As long as a living entity is conditioned within this material world, he must take material bodies one after another. His particular body is offered by the laws of nature according to the actions and reactions of this life. This body is exactly like one of the bodies which we always see in dreams. During our dream of sleep, we create so many bodies according to mental creation. We have seen gold, and we have also seen a mountain. So in a dream, we can see a golden mountain by combining the two ideas. Sometimes in dreams, we see that we have a body which is flying in the sky, and at the time, we completely forget our present body. Similarly, these bodies are changing. When you have one body, you forget the past body. During a dream, we may make contact with so many new kinds of bodies, but when we are awake, we forget them all. And actually, these material bodies are the creations of our mental activities. But at the present moment, we do not recollect our past bodies. The nature of the mind is flickering. Sometimes it accepts something, and immediately it rejects the same thing. Accepting and rejecting is the process of the mind in contact with the 5 objects of sense gratification: form, taste, smell, sound, and touch. In a speculative way, the mind comes in touch with the objects of sense gratification, and when the living entity desires a particular type of body, he gets it. Therefore, the body is an offering by the laws of material nature. The living entity accepts a body and comes out again into the material world to enjoy or suffer according to the construction of the body. Unless we have a particular type of body, we cannot enjoy or suffer according to our mental proclivities inherited from the previous life. The particular type of body is actually offered to us according to our mental condition at the time of death. If this all sounds confusing, it's because it's kind of meant to be. He's fast talking at this point, because let us not forget that his complete aim is to save someone's life. So it's kind of like negotiating with this brother-in-law terrorist that he has. And he's trying to okay, we got to talk fast and we got to talk a lot of things and try somehow or other to dissuade him from what he's about to do. And so, yes, there is a lot of logic in there. And a lot of this sounds a lot like Bhagavad Gita, right? For the soul, there is never birth nor death, nor having once been does the soul ever cease to be. The soul is eternal. It transmigrates, goes from body to body. Why should you be so upset? Now, If we really wanted to use some reverse psychology, what we could say to Vasudeva is, everything that you're saying to Kamsa also applies to you and Devaki. So why are we trying to save this life? But Vasudeva is saying all this, trying hope against hope to save a life. Sometimes as spiritualists, when we hear that we are not these bodies that are temporary and subject to birth and death and old age and diseases and all kinds of things, and that we are actually the soul within, sometimes we can feel like, but look at what Vasudeva is saying. Why should we be making so many arrangements to save these lives or save these bodies? And to that I say, because you can get a lot of spiritualists who wind up being against medicine or against life-saving measures or against so many things. And to this I say, let us not forget that Vasudeva said all this in order to save the life of his wife. He's trying really hard. So he's coming with some Vedic knowledge and Vedic logic that he's hoping that Kamsa will grasp onto and not think too far ahead with. Because as we can see, there's some big holes there, right? The logic is there, and we can see how this logic comes at a time when the adrenaline is rushing and you're under pressure, because really it's like, but everything you just said also pertains to Devaki. Why should you and Devaki be so afraid of death? Like, that's not the point. The point right now is to save this woman's life. So, the luminous planets like the sun, moon, or stars reflect themselves in different types of reservoirs like water, oil, or ghee. The reflection moves according to the movement of the reservoir. The reflection of the moon is on the water, and the moving water makes the moon also appear to be moving, but actually the moon is not moving. Similarly, by mental concoction, the living entity attains different kinds of bodies, although actually he has no connection with such bodies. But on account of illusion, being enchanted by the influence of Maya, the living entity thinks that he belongs to a particular type of body. That is the way of conditioned life. Suppose a living entity is now in a human form of body. He thinks that he belongs to the human community, or a particular country, or a particular place. He identifies himself in that way and unnecessarily prepares for another body which is not required by him. So this is a little commentary on how we can see people and they get so caught up with these identifications, right? These different ways of identifying with the body sometimes lead us down very dark and very seedy roads into very strange places. You know, you think, I've been identifying with this particular place, and my patriotism and my nationalism, they mean something. That is who I am. But then what happens if your country does things that you don't agree with? Then are we now still that country, you know? And then we find people saying, well, I've got to make this make sense. There's some cognitive dissonance, right? We find people trying to now, like, it's like, well, what happens when the heads of my country do something I don't agree with? Where does that leave me? What side does that put me on? And are other people now looking at me saying, this is your country, now you're the bad person? How is that possible? And the key is to remember that actually our affiliations with these places only last so long as a particular body. Then you get another body, and then you start identifying with that place, with that region, with those people, with a certain skin color, with a different skin color, with a certain gender, with a different gender, with a certain species, with a different species. So what's amazing is that we have had unlimited amounts of bodies, and we've identified in an unlimited amount of waves. And now Srila Prabhupada is often pointing out that now is the opportunity to try somehow and break free from all of that. Doesn't mean that everybody else is going to do it, but we have the opportunity to break free from all of that. And that actually comes with an opportunity for us to transcend these modes of material nature. And it's like, well, why should I transcend when no one else is going to? Like, it makes it so difficult, but the benefits are there. And that means those benefits are there for us. So why should we? Because we can reap the benefits. We can get ourselves out of this entangling cycle, which, to be honest, stinks. Right? Is anybody really having a great time here? I don't think so. I've spoken to a lot of people, And I've seen people who have like really awesome cushy stuff. Like, they've got luxury, all kinds of stuff. And they're not having a great time here either. No one is having a good time. So we can get out. And so as hard as it is and as isolating as it can feel, especially sometimes when we're looking at ourselves going, I am expending all this energy just to do the right thing. And it feels as though no one else is. What do I do? So Vasudeva in this section, he's also facing the same dilemma. What do you do when it looks like no one else around you will do the right thing? Do you do the right thing? Or do you go along with everybody else thinking, if nobody else is doing the right thing, well then, I'll follow along with the crowd. No sense in stepping out of line. Takes too much energy. But Vasudeva has decided to take on the role of protecting Devaki, which is what he promised to do not too long ago before a sacred fire. Right? So he's taken all of these vows. I promise I'll protect her. I will cherish her. I will ornament her. I'll make sure that her mind is steady and her heart is pacified and soothed. Now imagine if then just 10 seconds later Kamsa's like, I'll kill her. And he's like, ooh, sorry. Take one for the team, Devaki. So I'm really happy that Vasudeva took all of those promises incredibly seriously. Vasudeva continues. Such desires and mental concoctions are the cause of different types of bodies. The covering influence of material nature is so strong that the living entity is satisfied in whatever body he gets, and he identifies with that body with great pleasure. Therefore, I beg to request you not to be overwhelmed by the dictation of your mind and body. Now that was always a really interesting sentence. The covering influence of material nature is so strong that the living entity is satisfied in whatever body he gets, and he identifies with that body with great pleasure. You hear about this a little bit within the 5th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. There are descriptions of 26 hellish planets. So for the people who say in Hinduism you don't really have a concept of hell, we do. Oh, you do. We definitely do. And it's intense. And a lot of them. So not just not like one hell. You've got 26 hellish planets filled with experiences that you can have. It's like the worst form of an escape room, but horrible, right? And what they tell you is in each situation, you get a body that can withstand what is happening to you on each of these hellish planets. And I was always kind of like, I'm confused. But if you were to think about it this way, you've got pigs. And pigs have a type of body with a digestive system that can digest just about anything. Feces, people, anything at all. And now as people with people digestive systems, we're kind of thinking, we're like, oh, this is terrible. But the pigs are actually having a great time. This is what they want. This is giving them a sense of pleasure. And so whenever watching National Geographic or going to the zoo or anything, my mom's line was always, there's the body you could have. And so always growing up, I like it kind of like always threw that into the experience for me because I heard it so often. So now even I'll look at things and my mom's like, in my head, there's my mom's voice, there's a body you could have. And I'm like, no, thank you. I'm good. And the other thing she would say is, oof, somebody preparing for another body. I'm like, Mom. But she was often taking her spirituality so seriously. She was in the mindset of thinking like, no, but look at this is the results of actions and reactions. And then it would make her think, now what actions and reactions do I want to plant? Do I want to have this? Or do I want to make a plan to get out? And she was always trying to make a plan to get out, which is why I love my mom. But yeah, when we're looking at these situations and you're thinking now everybody gets a body that is giving them pleasure, it's like, really? So how is it And you see it when people have to turn the psychology of like hoarders. You ever see shows on hoarders or anything? Like, it's like shocking, it's intense. It's and you think, how could anyone live like that? But the person is living there and they're gaining some sense of pleasure. Either it's the pleasure of a slight comfort of running away from the fear of throwing things out. Right? So, you think about it and you're like, well, their fear of living like that was just not greater than their fear of throwing things out. And I'm like, yeah, but conversely, what you're getting when the fear of one thing is greater than the fear of others is a slight pleasure. So slight and minuscule. It's like a slight relief. Well, at least I don't have to let go of this. And so you see how people are having bodies that have mindsets, that have different situations and circumstances. And you think to yourself, my gosh, I could never live like that. And it's like, but that's just the body and the mindset you've been given this time. There's no telling what could happen next time or in the past, which is why Srila Prabhupada often says, he's like, don't waste this chance. Take this chance seriously as much as possible, because there is no telling if we roll the dice what will happen in the next situation. It's like, it's not like you get a video game and then you get to like pick your character, choose your character. It's like you're in the process of choosing the character now. And then at the end, it's like pop quiz that wasn't really a pop quiz because they told you. Like, you're constantly choosing. You're making those choices. You're making your cosmic bed. So we want to make sure that it's one that we like to lay in for a long time. Because while the concept of hell is not eternal, there is a situation where it can feel like an indeterminable amount of time. If you're in a situation that feels hellish, and if you've ever been in a situation, even in life, that feels like agony, and it feels like such a long time, when really it's like, well, that was a year out of, say, 100 years. And you're like, yeah, but that was the worst year of my life. It was terrible, horrible. So I always try and remember those. And I'm like, no, I want to make better choices. I just want to make better choices so as not to end up with a form that can withstand so many torturous things in a life. It's actually kind of fascinating when you get to it, because these hellish planets are inhabited with people, with living entities that carry out certain duties, and no one really wants to see those people. But those are also living entities in bodies with souls that you could get. Like, I'm like, wait, what? Excuse me? I remember my spiritual master, my own teacher, gave a lecture and kind of pointed that out. And that was like one big aha moment for me, especially as a bhakti kid, living with this philosophy since before I was born. And then really thinking, oh, I never stopped to think about the entities that inhabit those hellish planets and how they are actually living entities and souls with a body that any one of us could potentially have. And I was like, no, thank you. I'm good. I want to go on about my way and get out of this whole entangling situation. Get me out. Get me out. Somebody come pick me up. Get me out. So now let's see what Kamsa does after Vasudeva's dissertation on "You are not this body, Kamsa." Vasudeva thus requested Kamsa not to be envious of his newly married sister. One should not be envious of anyone, because envy is the cause of fear, both in this world and in the next. When one is before Yamaraj, the Lord of punishment after death, we were just talking about this, Vasudeva appealed to Kamsa on behalf of Devaki, stating that she was his younger sister. He also, actually, that sentence is weird. What happened here? One should not be envious of anyone, because envy is the cause of fear, both in this world and in the next, when one is before Yamaraj, the Lord of punishment after death. So now, that's interesting. It's like, what envy could be there with someone facing the Lord of punishment? And, I'm sure there are times when people are like, well, that guy got off scot-free. Like, he got off with nothing. What happened to me? Like, why not me? I don't think I'm that bad. Like, what? How come he got the light version? Like he just had to, sit somewhere in a forest for a little while. Meanwhile, my fate, I have to have the horrible fates. And there's some pretty intense fates mentioned in the fifth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. That was actually one of the first sections of Bhagavatam I read. I think I was maybe 7 or 9. And one would think, like, why in the world would you go and intentionally read the specific section on hellish planets? Well, I wanted to know what people were getting themselves into and what I might potentially get myself into. I wanted to know what was going to, I'm like, what's the worst that could happen? And then I found out what the worst was that could happen. I was like, oh, no, thank you. That was a bad idea. Because it creates an uneasiness. But what's amazing is that Krishna tries to find an unlimited amount of ways to save us. Now, that doesn't stop us from us getting in our own way, but it did make me want to take my spiritual life much more seriously. Even if the threat of eternality was not there. It's not like you'll be there eternally. I was like, I don't want to be there at all. I'm good. Let me not. But what's interesting is their lower planetary systems. And then you might think, everything in the lower planetary systems, because you've got upper planetary systems with the heavens and cool planets and all kinds of things. You got the middle planetary system. That's kind of where we're at. We're in the middle realm. And then you've got the lower planetary systems, which have a lot of planets, loads of planets and universes. Some of those planets are hellish planets, but you've also got some really, really cool places. You've got a place called Sutala Loka, and this is kind of where some of the demons live. And so you're thinking, why is she calling this a cool planet? Well, because there's a demon who rules over that section and lives there, and his name is Bali. And the person who has agreed to stay there as Bali's doorkeeper is Vamana. So none other than an incarnation of Lord Vishnu lives on Sutala with the demons and Bali's family, and whoever also decides to live with Bali. So when you think about it, higher, lower, we tend to put these categories in there and then think in terms of good and bad. But it's not. Vedic cosmology and Vedic archaeology is a lot of gray area. And the good is characterized by, where's the Supreme Lord? Can we find him in this place? Cool, then that place is good. And then it's like, well, where's the Supreme Lord? You can't find him? Well, then that place kind of it's not so great. So a lot of the things are characterized in terms of, where's Krishna? Where we can find Krishna, that's an amazingly good place. And when we can't find Krishna, it's like, well, can we bring him here? And then if not, then we try and figure out another contingency plan. But what I love is that Krishna is trying unlimitedly to save everyone. There's one story. Krishna actually visits Yamaraj in the office, right? So Yamaraj has an office in a kingdom. The kingdom is near the hellish planets, but not in them. And his kingdom is beautiful, really nice, but no one visits it because of its close proximity to the jail district. One day, Krishna decides to visit Yamaraj in his kingdom, and Yamaraj says, rightfully so, "Oh, my lord, please come in. What can I do for you? Why are you here? No one ever comes to visit me, let alone you, but now you're here, and I'm so happy." Gives him a warm reception. Everything is beautiful. And the Lord begins to kind of speak to Yamaraj, and he keeps getting interrupted. He's like, what is that awful wailing sound? Yamaraj says, "Well, my lord, that's the sound of souls receiving punishment and reform. It's where I work." And the Lord says, "Well, oh, that's awful. Like, you work there with your background music all day. Like, do you have noise canceling headphones? Like, well, how do you, goodness." It's like, "Well, when does it stop?" Yamaraj says, "Well, it doesn't as of yet. It doesn't." And so the Lord is kind of appalled. He's like, who set up this system? Like, who set this up? Yamaraj says, "Well, you did. I mean, I got my orders from you to help the living entities reap the benefits and reactions of what they've desired. So now here we go. And he's like, what do you mean I did? I never gave you a stop time? It's like, no, not yet. So he's like, well, it shouldn't be eternal. And he's like, no, well, they have to wipe out these sins. And some of them had a lot of them. So it's going to take a long time. And the Lord thinks this can't be. And in a mood of incredible, great compassion, from the heart of the Lord, there emerges a warrior woman. And she's got weapons and a shield and a sword and a disc and all kinds of things. Beautiful helmet, long flowing hair, and she's dressed unimaginably luxuriously. Beautiful complexion, wonderful woman. And he says, who are you? She said, well, my lord, I've been born from your very own body. I'm yours to command. What can I do for you? He says, well, since you were born out of my compassionate heart, you should save all the living entities. And since you are born on the 11th day of the lunar cycle, your name will be Ekadashi. He says, now what can I do for you? She says, well, my lord, if you've given me the chance to somehow benefit all living entities, then my boon to ask is, if the living entities honor me on my day of Ekadashi, then they should be freed from all and any sinful reactions. Lord says, just what I was hoping for, so be it. And on that day, and all those people, there's a mass exodus from the hellish planets. So I like a God that will follow you to the depths of hell just to save you. I can get behind a God that will do that for you. And now we have a God that will do that for you, with nothing more than a simple fast. And somehow or other, we're kind of thinking about it. And we're like, oh my gosh, Ekadashi is coming. What do I do? After I heard these stories when I was younger, I've always tried to be happy about Ekadashi ever since. I want to say never was there a time when I was sad about it, but I might be lying. So I've always tried to be happy when I see Ekadashi coming, because this is the compassion of our dearest friend, making loopholes just for us, just so that his people will not be without protection or shelter, an end to their suffering. This is our Lord, concerned with putting an end to our suffering, even the suffering that we made for ourselves. It's like, if it were me, I'm not sure I'd be like, well, you got yourself into this mess. I don't know. Got to leave you to it. But not our Lord. Our Lord is looking for ways. So this is the enviousness that can creep up on us, even after death. Vasudeva appealed to Kamsa on behalf of Devaki, stating that she was his younger sister. He also appealed at an auspicious moment at the time of marriage. A younger sister or brother are supposed to be protected as one's children. The position is overall so delicate, Vasudeva reasoned, that if you kill her, it will go against your high reputation. Vasudeva tried to pacify Kamsa by good instruction as well as by philosophical discrimination, but Kamsa was not to be pacified because his association was demoniac. Because of his demoniac associations, he was always a demon, although born in a very high and royal family. A demon never cares for any good instruction. He is just like a determined thief. One can give him moral instruction, but it will not be effective. Similarly, those who are demoniac or atheistic by nature can hardly assimilate any good instruction, however authorized it may be. That is the difference between demigod and demon. Those who can accept good instruction and try to live their lives in that way are called demigods, and those who are unable to take such good instruction are called demons. Failing in his attempt to pacify Kamsa, Vasudeva wondered how he would protect his wife Devaki. Now, there's a really, really, really cool podcast called Wisdom of the Sages, and they often talk about spiritual topics. And they were saying that, interestingly, in different yugas, demigods and demons would live on different planets, right? So in earlier yugas, they would live on different planets. Then as the yugas progressed, they would live on the same planet and in different kingdoms. Then as the yugas progressed, they would live in the same kingdom, but in different families, right? And sometimes you get like at least the family lineage is slightly different. There's some And then they said that in Kali Yuga, they now live in the same planet, in the same kingdom, in the same family, sometimes even within the same body. So you'll see we have divine and demoniac tendencies and divine and demoniac natures that are in this constant struggle, even within the same body, of how to move forward, where to go, what to do next. So this is the case of Kamsa, and we can see how important association is, because Kamsa was born into a great family. We've got Vasudeva in his family. We've got Ugrasena in his family. Ugrasena, he's really awesome. But now we've got Kamsa. And it's like you have a really gentle-natured sister like Devaki. And then you've got this horrible person, Kamsa. There's also a mystery to Kamsa's birth, which I'll get into in the next session. We can get an origin story for Kamsa to find out what in the world is behind this guy. So make sure you come back next week, same time, same place, because we've got to figure out what's the deal here. So you can also see when we have friends, when we have people that we associate with, you'll look and you'll think, that person looked like they were so smart. They like read every spiritual book. They've done all the things. And then you see them and it's like, did you lose all good intelligence? Like, what happened? It's because we have these divine and demoniac natures that are always fighting for superiority, right? They're always fighting to see who's going to take over the other. And so our association is a very serious and precarious thing that we have to try and balance. The more association that we're in, the more we can see how, and it's not even like our true colors, but it's like, show me your friends and I'll show you who you are. You know, it's the same ideology. Because what they say is, if you commit a crime twice, it feels less like a crime. And it also depends, it depends on your association. You start associating with a certain thing, it feels less like a crime and more like it's just life, especially if you don't get caught. Right? So if you don't get caught and there's no dire consequence, you start to think, it's fine. It's the worst that could happen. Such is the case with our spirituality. Such is the case with our lives. You go through one life and somehow you forget about the previous ones and you think, what's the worst that could happen? This life, I got this one life. Then you get another life. And you're thinking, I can't even remember the other ones. What's the worst that could happen? And we have forgotten that our eternal position is not in these bodies struggling for existence, not in these lives where we're just grasping over one another for supremacy. Our real lives are meant for a spiritual atmosphere, which is surcharged with beauty, bliss, luxury, happiness. But it is that very envy that Srila Prabhupada is warning us about earlier in this chapter, a few sentences before, that gets us here. That envy of looking at the Supreme Person and thinking, why? Why them? Why do they get to be worshipped? You know, sure, they could have their little worship, but also what about mine? Where's my worship? And that's the beginning. That's the beginning of it. Me thinking that I could take that supreme position. I am constantly learning on a daily basis that I cannot. I'm not equipped. And I feel as though I was specifically also made smaller than the rest, just so that I wouldn't get it in my head that I could take on all of these things. Like, no, we're going to make you small in stature also, so that maybe this time I'll get the message. So I'm trying to get the message, y'all. I'm trying to get it in my head that I am not equipped to be the supreme person of anything. Like, I'm not the supreme personality of anything. Anything at all. But I have a friend. Right? You ever meet those people and they're like, I know a guy. Spiritually, I know a guy. Supreme person. I can get you in touch with him. I can get you a meeting. I'll figure out what it'll cost you later, but I could do it. So, failing in his attempt to pacify Kamsa, Vasudeva wondered how he would protect his own wife Devaki. When there is imminent danger, an intelligent person should try to avoid the dangerous position as far as possible. Srila Prabhupada was already hip to the quarantine situation. Okay, clearly he was already hip to what it would take to end a pandemic. Avoid the dangerous situation as far as possible. I feel like if we could take one sentence, we get so caught up on so many different quotes of what Srila Prabhupada said and what he didn't say. If we could put this one quote on everything like really good ketchup. When there's a dangerous situation, as far as possible, one should avoid it. Doesn't that seem like common sense? Like, avoid the danger. You see this? Go the other way from the danger. Don't be a hero. That's my PSA. Stay safe, everybody. Avoid the danger. An intelligent person should try to avoid the dangerous position as far as possible. But if, in spite of endeavoring by all intelligence, one fails to avoid the dangerous position, there is no fault on his part. If you've done your best, if you've actually done the things, one should try his best to execute his duties. But if the attempt fails, he is not at fault. Vasudeva thought of his wife as follows: "For the present, let me save the life of Devaki. Then later on, if there are children, I shall see how to save them." He further thought, "If in the future I get a child who can kill Kamsa, just as Kamsa is thinking, then both Devaki and the child will be saved, because the law of providence is inconceivable. But now, some way or other, let me save the life of Devaki." There is no certainty how a living entity contacts a certain type of body, just as there is no certainty how the blazing fire comes in contact with a certain type of wood in the forest. When there is a forest fire, it is experienced that the blazing fire sometimes leaps over one tree and catches another by the influence of the wind. Similarly, a living entity may be very careful and fearful in the matter of executing his duties, but it is still very difficult for him to know what type of body he is going to get in the next life. Maharaj Bharat was very faithfully executing the duties of self-realization, but by chance he contacted temporary affection for a deer, and he had to accept his next life in the body of a deer. Once upon a time, we watched a puppet show on the same subject. So maybe for our patrons, we'll watch it again. And if you'd like to join a patron puppet show movie watching afternoon, evening, or some sort, because this puppet show is quite short, it's like 30 minutes. So that could be a cool, fun activity for us patrons to have once again. Just kind of reflect on what's happening there. You'd have to join Patreon for that, though. So for all our YouTube listeners, and I'm seeing you. Thanks for being here, by the way. You've got to join Patreon to have a puppet show watching movie afternoon. So Vasudeva, after deliberating on how to save his wife, began to speak to Kamsa with great respect, although Kamsa was the most sinful man. Sometimes it happens that a most virtuous person like Vasudeva has to flatter a person like Kamsa, a most vicious person. That is the way of all diplomatic transactions. So if you ever find yourself in a diplomatic situation, you have to flatter somebody that you really, really, really don't like, somebody in a position of power, you find yourself in government administration, and you're thinking, what kind of person has to do this? A smart one. Just know that it's a smart one that takes learning the ropes of diplomacy. That is the way of all diplomatic transactions. Although Vasudeva was deeply aggrieved, he presented himself outwardly as cheerful, which I think is interesting. So whenever you're thinking, like, I don't want to play the game and have to pretend, even Vasudeva had to. He addressed the shameless Kamsa in that way because he was so atrocious. Vasudeva said to Kamsa, "My dear brother-in-law, please consider that you have no danger from your sister. You are awaiting some danger because you have heard a prophetic voice in the sky. But that danger is to come from the sons of your sister who are not even present now. And who knows, there may or may not be sons in the future. Considering all this, you are safe for the present. Nor is there cause of fear from your sister. Because, he's like, she's not going to kill you right now. So, if there are any sons born of her, I promise that I shall present all of them to you for necessary action." Kamsa knew the value of Vasudeva's word of honor, and he was convinced by his argument. For the time being, he desisted from the heinous killing of his sister. Thus Vasudeva was pleased and praised the decision of Kamsa. In this way, he returned home. So we'll continue with this chapter next week, and we'll add in some things. So some of these things are going to be a slow journey through Krishna book, and some of the chapters will move rather quickly. But there's so much fun backstory that we can get into. So next week we'll do a little backstory about who Kamsa was and what Kamsa was doing before the marriage of Vasudeva and Devaki. So we'll get to find out a whole host of things about Kamsa, the villain, and we'll see how he features in many of these origin stories and backstories. So it'll be fun, and I like to put in little details because I feel like it makes the situation much more intense. We get an idea of why, just why, an eighth son would want to kill Kamsa specifically, because it seems kind of random, doesn't it? Like we just picked a random guy. Why Kamsa? What's the big deal? Like, who even heard of this guy? So we'll find out what the big deal is about Kamsa, why he would have been chosen, and what's happening. So let's see. I am so sure that there are loads of takeaways from YouTube because I saw them. Our good friend Ashi is always, always, always active, and I thank you so much. So Ashi is saying, yes, we should not be afraid of losing anything or anyone other than Krishna. Everything else is temporary and will anyways be taken away. That goes for everything except for Krishna and devotees. Krishna has a very interesting viewpoint and view on it, which you can see in the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Queen Kunti makes a prayer, and she has gone through so many rounds of obstacles through her family life that at one point she tells Krishna, she says, oh, Krishna, please free me from the entangling relations of seeing people as friends and enemies, even up to my own family. Like, free me from the shackles of family life and my connection with all these family members, because all I need is you. And in the purport, Srila Prabhupada says, now Kunti is making a very honest and sincere prayer. But was Krishna going to free her from the shackles or this thinking of being bonded with family life? And he says, no, of course not, because she was in a family of devotees. If you are in a family of like-minded, spiritually minded people, they are not to just be given up and cast aside as seen as material bonds, which are just waiting to entangle you. And I say this because sometimes spiritualists can get this view that it's only Krishna and no one else. But what if Krishna, in his infinite mercy, has sent you family members? Is it only Krishna and no one else? And then we just kind of toss those family members to the side, the ones that are helping us to remember Krishna every day, the ones that are there for us saying, how are you? Are you feeling enthused? Are you feeling sad? And if you're feeling sad, then let's help us remember Krishna. Those people, Srila Prabhupada says, are never to be given up. And that always made me feel nice, because I think I have a severe fear of being cast aside by the people that I love the most. And having come to this current material body, this particular material body, has come with a certain fear that I will be abandoned by those that I rely on, or those that I put in the work, or those that I love the most. So reading that always helped me with that fear. And that, oh good, my family members don't have to cast me aside in a feeling of renunciation or spiritual renunciation. I feel like that spiritual renunciation can get really sticky as an understanding, isn't it? We can kind of feel like we don't even know which way to go when it comes to renunciation. It's such a big word. And I feel like the supreme emblem of renunciation is Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva is so renounced. He is the example of renunciation. But he loves his wife. He's not giving her up for anything. And when he lost a wife once upon a time, his grief was so intense that it threw him into such a state of depression that he did not want to be affiliated with anything, including the entire universe. He was really like, nah, that's it. I'm going internally. I can't deal with any of you. And so I feel like Lord Shiva is such a beautiful balance of renunciation, but remembering that those relationships count. Those relationships help us thrive. They keep us going. They help push us forward. So if you have relationships in your life that keep you going spiritually, hold on to them for dear life. Those are the people we need in order to serve with. We just heard about how important association is. In the 9th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Srila Prabhupada speaks about how our association presents the foundation for our faith. And so Vasudeva had great association, and so he chose faith over fear, even up to saying, I promise, I'll offer every one of my children to you. That takes an immense amount of faith, thinking that if that 8th son is born, then I have no fear of Kamsa. This is something he has no idea if it will even happen. He heard one administrative voice from the sky and was willing to take it on faith. We've heard so many things, and we are trying to take it with as little faith as humanly possible. Right? It's like our motto nowadays is like, I can't just go put my faith in any old thing, so we put it in nothing. Nothing. Or so we think. So we think. Because we might think, I'm not a person that lives on faith. I live on like science. I live on what I can perceive and touch and see with my own eyes. And yet every day we're working on faith. Unconsciously. Because we wake up. We cross the street. We get on planes and trains. We get in automobiles. We do all kinds of things. Right? When you get behind the wheel of your car, you're not thinking, I wonder what the other drivers are doing. Like, everybody's going on about their business. And when you get cut off by somebody, you're angry because we're all viewing things from our situation. You're not thinking, wow, wonder if that person cut me off because they have a pregnant lady in the car who's like going into labor right at this moment. Or wonder if that person cut me off because they're having a bad day because they just found out a family member has a life-threatening illness or some sort. Like, we're always thinking, I can't believe that person cut me off. How dare they? And sometimes that person cut you off for no reason. Sometimes that person cut you off for a reason. But everything is happening. And we've put ourselves in the center of our own universe. And not only are we subconsciously, unconsciously working on faith and not acknowledging it, but we are angry when things are not turning out according to the faith that we say we don't put in anything. Right? We wake up with the faith that my day is going to go according to my plans. And when it doesn't go according to our plans, we're like, I'm having a bad day. But we started out with the faith and the expectation that we'd have a good day. Hopefully. Hopefully. But we're putting our faith in something every day. And to those hardcore scientists, I say, when you go and get surgery, there's no amount of vetting that you can do on any surgeon that would logically say, okay, go ahead. Put me into a mystical sleep that I cannot wake up from. And I'm going to trust that you know enough science not to kill me with this mystical sleep, but just to put me deep enough into a sleep so that you can somehow open up my body, remove organs, put new organs in, sew some things up, reconnect tubes that I don't even know the name to, sew me back up, wake me back up. Sometimes they stop your heart during those things. It's like, yeah, no, go ahead. Yeah, sure. Do the things. So when it's called for, we act with incredible faith. Because I don't know that surgeon. Even if I grew up with that surgeon, sometimes it's worse if you've grown up with the doctor. They don't let the doctors work on the people they know, right? Because sometimes you grow up with the person, you're like, no, I know you. You can't be my surgeon. I've seen you through some things, and But we go and we'll put our faith in surgeons to say, do all these mystical things. And like, it's just numbers. I'm like, you can't tell me that it's just numbers, because I've been counting my entire life, and there's no amount of calculations that I have made that can put me into a mystical sleep and let somebody operate on me. The math does not compute for me. I'm sorry. So, it's so important for us to look at the ways that we are exercising our faith, because it helps our faith get stronger. It helps us choose. Now, what is worthy of my faith? Is it worth it for me to say, well, I'll put my faith in all the other drivers and I'll cross the street, having faith that they will do what is necessary and stop at the stoplight. But I can't say that I'll put my faith in an all-knowing supreme person who is making my lungs work every day. Well, it's like, well, why not? What's the difference? What's the difference? I don't know any of those people. I don't know if are actually going to stop and obey the rules. I'm putting my faith in those people. I'm putting my faith in the judicial system, that there will be consequences if they don't. But what's the difference? What's the difference? God is saying there are universal judicial systems. I'm working this universe for you. And still we won't believe. We have such a hard time believing. And usually it's because of somebody else. Not usually because of God. Because can you really say, it's like, well, I had an encounter with God. I saw God face to face. We had words. Those words were not great. And so from that experience, I've realized that God is a jerk and I'm not talking to God. But usually that's not the case. That's not what happens. Like normally somebody doesn't say, well, God was mean to me. It's like, well, was God mean to you or is it other people? Well, it's not other people if my grandmother died. It's like, well, was that material nature? Who do you know that is living forever? It's like, well, no one. Everybody has to die. And I'm like, so then why are you faulting God for something that everybody has to do? Well, God should have left my grandmother here because I love my grandmother. I was like, well, that's different. That's different. We're not angry with God. We're sad with the situation. Overwhelmingly sad. And it gets sad when we lose people that we love. But what fault of that is God's? And what fault of that is ours for wanting to be in a place where we could control everything? Because without that desire to want to control everything and be worshipped as though we could also be the gods, this material creation would not have to exist. There would only be spiritual realms. What's fascinating about this material realms and spiritual realms is, fun fact, if you were to divide this entire creation, material and spiritual, right, the entirety of creation, realistically, if you were to divide it into quarters, right, fourths, here we go. That's how you know I'm a homeschooling teacher, right? Quarters and fourths. This material creation would only take up 1/4 of this entire creation. The other 3/4 are spiritual content, spiritual worlds, where we don't have to deal with birth, death, old age, and disease, where we don't have to deal with these same anxieties, where we don't have to deal with the fear of hellish planets and all of these things. That doesn't exist there. And the difference between that material creation and the spiritual creation is no bigger than just a veil. The biggest difference is here. It's all right here. Which is why in Bhagavad Gita it is stated so many places that due to one's association, due to one's actions and thought processes, one can live in the spiritual world even in this life. It's like, well, how's that possible? Because you start to understand that the distance between the material worlds and the spiritual worlds is no more than a veil. It's just here. That mindset that has given me this body is the same mindset that I can use to get myself out of it permanently. It actually doesn't have to exist. It only exists because we have the desires to be worshipped as the supreme controller. Once we give up that desire, really truly, that material creation has no force hold on us anymore. And what a wonderful journey that would be. That's why I feel like spiritual adventures are awaiting us on this path. And I think that those spiritual adventures might be the most fun ones that we could ever have. So whenever times get rough and I think, I'm done with this whole spirituality thing, then I try and remind myself that they're adventures and there's something over there. I want to see it. I want to get to it. There's something over there. So yeah, that's our takeaway. That spiritual family members are never to be given up, and we should cling tight to them as much as possible. Ashi also says, Bhagavad Gita 9:18, I am the supreme goal of all living beings. I am also their sustainer, master, witness, abode, shelter, and the exact quote is, and the most dear friend, which is why I often say Krishna is our supreme bestie. So once upon a time, I was maybe 14, and I was at a festival, and I was kind of like walking around looking for my friends. And I had an older friend, and they said, what are you looking for? And I was like, oh, I'm looking for my friends. I lost them. And they're like, but you have Krishna, right? And I was like, yes. And they're like, then you have all your friends. And I was like, yeah, but I'm looking for my, it's an interesting concept. And it's something that's kind of stayed with me. And that idea of, I've lost my friends. I lost my friend. I forgot my Krishna for a really, really long time. But now this life is a journey and an exploration in how do I find my friend? I just want to find my friend again. So thanks for all being friends on their journey toward me finding my friends again. I hope that we can all find our friends again, and we can be reunited with our supreme bestie at the end of this journey, because that's the goal. That's the goal, reunion, as we try to advance steadily on the path. And it's not easy. It's hard. We come in contact with so many Kamsa-like situations, right? Maybe not physical Kamsas, but they're Kamsa-like situations where you feel like this is a lose-lose situation. How do I choose between this? We try and get in touch, try and anchor ourselves with these spiritual realizations and these spiritual stories that give us hope. And then we try and pray and put one foot in front of the next, understanding that, okay, here we go, Lord. I'm going to walk in grace and in mercy and in compassion, but I'm going to need you to lead the way. Otherwise, just going in blind, just kind of stumbling along. So thank you for being with me. Thanks for once again helping us see through everything. Once again, we're back next week, same time, same place. Please join in. Please just take it for granted that we're back here, unless you hear differently. Just join in. Come see us, and we'll see each other again soon. Bye, friends. Shri Radha Govinda Dev Ki Jai. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.